there is a specific thought that keeps interrupting them. Not when they decide to think about you, not in the moments they set aside for the quiet indulgence of whatever this is, in the middle of things, in the middle of sentences and meetings and conversations and the ordinary, unremarkable movement through a Tuesday that should contain nothing more significant than whatever a Tuesday normally contains. The thought arrives without permission, and it is not a vague thought, not the general, pleasantly warm awareness of someone you like that surfaces briefly and then subsides back into the background where such things are supposed to live. It is specific, sensory, detailed in the particular, slightly inconvenient way of something the body rather than the mind is producing. Something that lands with a physical quality before it has been organized into anything the thinking self can properly file or dismiss or redirect. It is the thought of kissing you, and it keeps coming back with a persistence that has become, in recent days, something they can no longer pretend is not happening. I want to begin with the pretending, because the title names it and the naming of it is significant. They have been pretending for a period of time that has involved real effort. The specific, sustained, continuously renewed effort of someone who has decided that what they feel is not something they are in a position to act on, and who has therefore committed to a performance of not feeling it, or feeling it less, or feeling it in ways that do not require them to do anything about it. The performance has been consistent in how they engage with you, in the specific, carefully managed quality of proximity they maintain. Not too close, not close enough for anything to happen that cannot be walked back into something ordinary. The precise, conscious calibration of a person who knows exactly where the edge of something is and has been staying just safely behind it. You may have felt this calibration without being able to name it, the specific quality of someone who is near you and managing the nearness, who is warm without crossing into the territory of warmth that would require acknowledgement, who is interested in a way that could technically be described as friendly, even though something in the frequency of how they are interested does not quite fit the description of friendly. That management is ending. Let me describe what I am seeing in the image that surfaced for this reading, because it came through with a specificity I was not expecting, and I want to honor it. I see a person trying to pay attention to something that has their nominal attention, their eyes, their physical orientation, the outward performance of engagement that they are maintaining. And underneath all of that outward performance, a current running in the opposite direction, the specific, slightly maddening experience of a mind that keeps sliding toward one thing no matter how deliberately it is pointed at another. The one thing is you, more specifically, it is the particular sensory, impossibly persistent thought of what it would be like to close whatever distance currently exists between them and you at a moment of sufficient closeness and actually physically cross it. The thought is not abstract. It is not the romantic movie version of kissing that lives in the imagination as a beautiful, slightly blurry possibility. It is specific in the way that physical things are specific when the body has been thinking about them long enough to have developed strong opinions about the details. The angle of approach, the specific distance before contact, what happens in the moment immediately before. The body has been thinking about this longer than they have been willing to admit. The body has been thinking about this longer than they have been willing to admit. I want to describe what it is like to carry a thought with this specific quality, because it is different from ordinary longing, and the difference is worth naming. Ordinary longing can be managed by the mind. It responds to reason. It can be redirected by sufficient distraction, temporarily quieted by sufficient engagement with other things, persuaded into something more manageable by the application of practical considerations. What I am describing does not respond to the mind in this way. It is not organized by thought. It is generated by the body. By whatever the body does when it encounters someone, it registers as significant in a very particular way. And the body, which does not have access to the practical considerations and the reasonable arguments and the careful logic that the mind uses to organize emotional experience into something livable, simply keeps producing its signal regardless of how thoroughly the mind has addressed it. The signal keeps arriving at full volume, regardless of whether the volume is convenient. This is not something they chose. The thought of kissing you is not something they decided to have. It decided to have them. And the distinction between choosing a thought and being had by one is the distinction between something manageable and something they have been losing ground to for a while. They have been losing ground. And I want to speak to what this particular thought does to a person when it arrives the way I am describing. It is not comfortable, not because it is unwanted, because it is wanted with a specificity and a persistence that exceeds what can be easily managed. That keeps producing a response in them that is not subtle and that requires actual effort to contain when the thought arrives in a context where containing it is socially necessary. Like when you are present. This is the part that has been making the pretending increasingly costly, because the thought was manageable enough when it arrived in their absence in the private moments when there was no performance of normalcy to maintain. But the thought does not stay politely in the private moments. It arrives when you are nearby, when you say something in a particular way, when there is a quality of closeness, physical or otherwise, that makes the imagined version of what they want and the actual present version of you occupy the same space simultaneously. And in those moments, the gap between what they are pretending and what is actually happening in them becomes almost insupportably wide. They are done maintaining that gap. I want to speak to what done pretending actually looks like, because it is not necessarily dramatic, not the kind of sudden, explosive crossing of a line that the phrase might suggest. What I am reading has a different quality. It is a quiet collapse of the management, not a decision to act immediately, more fundamental than that, a decision to stop actively preventing, to stop maintaining the careful positioning, the calibrated proximity, the managed warmth that has been the mechanism of the pretending, to simply let what has been building in them become present in how they exist around you, without the continuous effort of containment that has been shaping every interaction. The pretending was effort. The stopping of it is relief. And what the relief produces is not a dramatic gesture, not a declaration or a move that announces itself as the crossing of a line, something subtler and in some ways more significant. A change in the quality of how they are around you that you are going to feel before you have words for it, a slight loosening of the management, a quality of presence that is less calibrated than it was, that allows more of what is actually there to exist in the space between you, rather than the carefully curated version that has been all that was permitted until now. You are going to notice they ran out of pretend, and what is left without the pretending to cover it is exactly what has been there all along. I want to describe what that looks like in practice, because the ending of pretending does not announce itself. It does not come with a declaration or a visible shift in behavior that would be immediately legible to anyone observing from the outside. It comes in the texture of small things, a moment of eye contact that holds slightly longer than the previous standard they had been maintaining, a response to something you say that is slightly more honest than the careful, calibrated responses they have been producing, a quality of attention that is less distributed, more specific, more pointed directly at you than the social version of their engagement that has been the public face of this dynamic. These small things accumulate, and what they accumulate toward is a moment where the texture of the interaction between you crosses a threshold that neither of you names out loud, but both of you register something is different now, not just from the outside, something in the air between you when you are together. In the specific, slightly charged quality of ordinary interactions that used to be able to pass as ordinary and are finding that designation increasingly difficult to maintain, let me speak to why now. Because done pretending does not arrive randomly, and the timing of it matters for how you understand what is happening. Something happened, not necessarily with you directly, something internal to them. A moment or a series of moments that finally tipped the ongoing negotiation they have been having with themselves about this, away from the pretending side and firmly, decisively in the direction of done. I feel this as a specific kind of exhaustion. The particular exhaustion of someone who has been maintaining something for long enough that the maintenance has become more costly than whatever it was originally protecting. Who has been spending energy on the performance of not feeling something that continues to feel exactly as strongly regardless of how much energy the performance consumes. At a certain point, that calculation becomes impossible to justify. The energy required to maintain the pretending is no longer available to give because too much has already gone into giving it. And in the absence of that energy, the pretending simply is not sustainable anymore. Not through any dramatic collapse, through the quiet, inevitable surrender of something that has been running on a resource that has finally been depleted. They ran out of pretend. And what is left, without the pretending to cover it, is exactly what has been there all along. There is an image I want to describe because it arrived mid-reading and it captures something the words have been circling. Two people in a moment of ordinary proximity, a moment that from the outside contains nothing remarkable, the kind of closeness that daily life produces without announcing itself as significant. Maybe a shared space, a shared task, a conversation that requires the kind of physical nearness that certain contexts make unremarkable. And in that moment, from inside one of those people, everything is remarkable. The specific awareness of distance, not as an abstraction, but as a measurement. The precise, involuntary calculation of exactly how many inches or feet separate them from you. The acute consciousness of every small movement that changes that number, of every shift in position that makes it larger or smaller, of the specific quality of attention that proximity to you generates in them that is impossible to turn off and equally impossible in this moment to act on. Not yet. But the not yet has a quality it did not have before. It is temporary. The not yet has stopped feeling like the permanent arrangement and started feeling like the last remaining distance before something crosses. Tell me in the comments if this lands somewhere specific, if there is a person whose proximity has a different quality than the proximity of others. Whose closeness produces a specific awareness in you that you have been managing in your own way. If what I am describing feels like a dynamic you have been inside, I want to know, I want to speak to something about you specifically, because this reading is not only about what they feel, it is about what you produce. And what you produce is worth examining directly. You are not passive in this, not in a calculating sense, not in the sense of having engineered this response through strategic behavior or deliberate management of how you present yourself, but in the sense of simply being who you are in a way that cannot help but generate what it generates. There is something about you that makes the thought of physical closeness with you significantly more charged than the equivalent thought about most other people. Not just attractiveness, that is present, but it is not the whole account. What charges the thought is the combination, the specific Virgo quality of you that presents the world with someone who is simultaneously precise and warm, guarded and genuinely present, capable of extraordinary depth and capable of the specific disarming quality of being fully there in an ordinary moment. The combination produces a particular kind of wanting, not the wanting of someone who is simply appealing on the surface, the wanting of someone who seems like they would be fully present in intimacy the way they are fully present in conversation, who brings the same quality of genuine attention to things that matter, who would not be anywhere else in the moment of the kiss except entirely in it. That is what they have been thinking about, not just the physical act. The quality of presence you would bring to it, I want to speak now to what comes next. Not in the vague, eventually something will happen way, in the specific, already in motion way of something that has been decided internally and is now simply finding its external form. They are looking for the moment, not manufacturing one, not engineering a context or setting a scene or doing any of the deliberate, effortful things that people do when they have decided to make something happen. Looking for the moment in the specific way of someone who has stopped preventing and is now simply available, whose attention to the ordinary interactions between you has acquired a different quality because each one is now being held as a potential moment rather than as something to be carefully navigated away from one. The posture has changed from avoidance to availability. And what availability does in a dynamic where something has been building on both sides of whatever the space between you currently is create conditions. Opens the possibility of the moment occurring naturally rather than requiring engineering. Allows the ordinary closeness of ordinary interactions to tip at some point into something that cannot be called ordinary. That tipping is coming soon. In the specific electric, slightly disorienting way that things happen when both people have finally stopped preventing them, I want to say something direct about what you do with this, because the reading has been describing their state and their movement, and I want to make sure the question of your own role in what comes next is addressed honestly. You have been managing something to, in your own way, not necessarily the same management, not necessarily the same internal experience, but some version of a response to this person and this dynamic that you have been organizing carefully, some level of awareness of what exists between you that you have been deciding how much to acknowledge and how much to leave in the comfortable ambiguity of something that does not require a position to be taken. That management also has a cost. And I want to ask you something in the quiet of this reading that I want you to answer only to yourself. If the moment arrives, if the tipping happens in the way I am describing and you are standing in it, What do you actually want? Not what you think you should want, not the version of what you want that has been filtered through every practical consideration and every reason this might be complicated and every protection you have built against the vulnerability of wanting something clearly and not being certain of the outcome. What do you actually want? Because the moment is going to arrive asking exactly that question. And the answer that matters most will be the one you have already been honest with yourself about before the moment creates the pressure of answering in real time. As we close, I want to give you the full image. Someone who has been thinking about kissing you with a persistence and a specificity that their own pretending has been unable to contain. Someone who has run out of the energy required to maintain that pretending and who is now simply present with what they feel without the management that was previously shaping every interaction. Someone who's not waiting for a manufactured moment, but who is now available to the natural moment when it arrives. And the natural moment arriving in the space between two people who have both, in their own ways, stopped preventing what has been building since before either of them admitted it was building. That space is live. What it produces, when it finally produces it, is going to feel less like a beginning and more like something that was always inevitable, because it was